And when I leave the biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife, Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children, who are my pride and my joy.
Had he shown that level of emotion to build that level of connection with the public earlier, do you think he would be resigning now?
When people start to do that displacement of aggression thing, and that's what we started to see in the UK, where people are getting angry and they're putting their aggression on politicians.
If you're struggling to socially engage, therefore you're turning to a chatbot because it's really, really good at active listening, then are you ever going to develop the skills to become better at socially engaging? Hello and welcome to Equipped. I'm Harry Lansley.
And I'm Garner.
And today we're going to talk about a couple of topics that have caught our eye this week. First of all, we've got Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, and his resignation. We're going to focus specifically on the element of his resignation speech where he got emotional, which is one of the things he was always criticised for not doing. Then secondly, we're going to look at AI companions and how the elderly and the youth are now using AI companions to combat loneliness. And finally, we're going to look at quiet burnout and the leadership recession. So this is high-performing leaders now, with the benefit of AI, are taking on so much work, still performing really, really well, but underneath suffering with the consequences of burnout. So to kick things off then, Aaron, the Keir Starmer resignation speech, you've watched it?
I have indeed.
Now, we're not going to touch on the political aspects of it, but there was an element of his speech where he goes on to talk about being the most important job now for him is being a great husband to his wife and being a great dad to his two kids. And he audibly cracks up at that point.
Yes.
Now, what was particularly interesting about this is that segment of the video went viral. So it was all on social media and everyone was like, oh my God, look at him, he does have emotion. And it was just quite ironic that it took his last major speech of the being Prime Minister to show an element of his personality which everybody has criticised him for not showing earlier. So I guess the question I've got is, had he shown that level of emotion to build that level of connection with the public earlier, do you think he would be resigning now?
That's difficult to say without going too much into kind of policies and that kind of stuff, because a lot of what people are annoyed about is economy and that kind of stuff, which doesn't have a huge connection to that. But one of the reasons he has been less popular is because he doesn't have a personality and that kind of stuff. So there is some of that, and it was interesting to see it. And there is some feeling there, but I think there's an element of some people, and there's possibility here, thinking, because it was scripted. So he looks down at his notes and then goes into that bit. So it's written to make sure that bit is at the end. So there's a PR from a recency point of view, primacy and recency. People are going to remember the last thing they hear in that speech, and the last thing they hear is this human thing. So is it a way of him gaining back public support at the end of his tenure? So there's that. So I think maybe, but the party political games that have been played in this country over the last however long may have overridden even if he did that. And I can't think of a reason how he could do it, because it's not typically in his nature to do that kind of performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because he was always given credit for being quite good with policy and procedure, in the sense of he's a lawyer. He's very good at putting the things in place.
Great experience.
But he was always criticised as, we just don't know who you are. We don't know, who you support. And obviously, it looks like Andy Burnham's going to step in. So this is the current mayor of Manchester is the front runner to take over the role. Now, from a policy perspective, there hasn't been any major differences from the two of them. But what is clear to see is the communication skills of Andy Burnham versus Keir Starmer. And then you only have to look at the politics across the world to see that if you're a great communicator, if you can connect with the audience, that seems to hold more weight in today's world than just being really, really good at implementing policy.
I think so. It's about, again, that connection where you've got a lot of the reasons that the whole country has turned on the Labour Party generally may be to do with leadership. Obviously, you have to put it somewhere, and he's the leader of the Labour Party. But there's an element of, in politics generally, of this dehumanisation of politicians.
Yeah.
So, because politicians aren't people in the eyes of the public, they become symbols for the parties and policies they represent. So it's easy, it's similar. I mean, we've talked in the past about radicalisation and that kind of stuff, and about the staircase of radicalisation, and the first few steps really are the same in that kind of process as well, where you have that concept of people aren't happy, and on that first step, that ground floor, when they're going, I'm not happy with my material condition, I'm aware that things aren't good, the economy, jobs, immigration, whatever it might be that people are talking about. And then that point where someone suddenly says, well, you do realise there's an option over here, you can come and look in this direction, and people start, oh, what, there's an option, which is where what we saw with things like the reform kind of sway, where people suddenly went, well, something completely different. You had a lot of protest votes against, so it wasn't necessarily votes for reform to be in power, but it was a lot of protest votes
give them a kick in the nuts.
Yeah. So you had that movement across there, but then that can pull a bit more when people start to do that displacement of aggression thing, and that's what we started to see in the UK, where people are getting angry and they're putting their aggression on politicians. And we see it. We did the walk and talk with the chief whip around the park, and in that podcast he was talking about, he'll put he can put any comment on Facebook, and the comments underneath are brutal. It's disgusting and insulting and horrible. But you need a lot of resilience in that job, because again, they're attacking the symbol of the Labour Party, and the symbol of it's not the person, but it's addressed to the person, but it's not really about the person. It's about the displacement of aggression and that kind of thing. So when you have come back, the reason I'm saying that when we come back to Keir Starmer doing that, it brings that dehumanisation is harder to do, because you now see someone that's talking about things that are relatable. That to parents, to husbands, and that go, oh wow, there's a loving relationship, there's an actual human here, which makes people go, oh, I'm being a bit mean in the way that I talk about politicians, because politicians have the same worries that we have. But because they are symbols of policy and the struggles we have as a country, people do that dehumanisation, because it's easier to attack a symbol than it is to attack a person.
So is there a way then that a politician can develop the skills to better do that?
Well, I think this is where the Burnham effect is happening, the King of the North and all that kind of stuff, because it's seen as somebody that represents us. And when I say us, I don't mean because I'm technically a Southerner, but there's a voice of that kind of inequality and all that kind of stuff, and fairness. He's been playing on the term hope, hope for the future and stuff. And as people have been saying, like, who doesn't have hope? So he's talking about hope and change. We yet to see that in policy, obviously, but it's a different voice that has a different connection and has less of that dehumanisation at the moment. My worry is, as soon as you come into the party, if you don't have the right policies in place, then Burnham could end up in the same position, because popularity ratings for Keir Starmer was really good initially, and then quickly bombed when they can't follow through, which isn't necessarily their fault. The whole world is difficult at the moment. So I think if you can connect to the things that your public are looking for, your voting public, and you can relate to them and say things they want to hear, rather than just playing party political games. And if you could be more of a person, be more connected locally, try and state that, so the local MP in a clinic, for example, is going to have more of an impact because he's talking about local issues that mean something to local people. The second you get into Westminster and you broaden it out to a UK thing, you're trying to be more generic about policy and not specific local issues.
Yeah.
I think that's harder at that point. So the local MP side, having a chat with them, even then, it's still hard because they've still got to play the wider game. But yeah, I think it's that connection.
That's what allows you to kind of massage your way through the bad times. So a government's always going to have bad times. They're always going to have policies that are unpopular or policies that are delayed. And I think the reason why Keir Starmer's government suffered so much was because they weren't able to massage through the bad times, because they just didn't have a way to communicate effectively with the public on the public's terms. And I think of Obama, even Donald Trump, massively different politics, but the connection the public have with them is significant because they do wear their hearts on their sleeves.
Yeah.
So you are able to understand the person underneath the politics.
Yeah, and it's about, I mean, getting in is easy. It's the follow through that's hard, right?
Yeah.
So getting in, you just say the things that people want to hear. Like, if I go into power, there'll be more jobs, we'll have more money in the country, the economy will grow, there'll be less immigration, or whatever it is that, which isn't a good thing necessarily, because we do need immigration, just to clarify. So you just say all the things that people are moaning about, and then you get voted in, but then you don't follow through, and that's where a lot of the issues you have with campaigning is. They use that. It's like, can you really do that? Can you really do those things? Because then you're building up this hope, and then
Overpromising, under-delivering.
Overpromising and under-delivering, and you're going to have a bigger backlash than if you kind of were a bit more balanced and did your best than promising the world and not delivering.
So let's say if we wound back 18 months and you had the ability to coach Keir Starmer to better connect with his audience, to improve his communication, what would be the areas you'd work on first?
I think it is difficult because I did a public speaking thing the other day, and someone wanted to do some mic technique work and those kinds of things. And I think the best advice you can have is be unashamedly you. That authentic self coming across, because people know when they're getting sound bites.
Yeah.
We're not stupid. Yes, you have to have PR. You need a PR team that says probably best at this point of time avoiding that topic, because you will get questions on this and questions on this, and we don't have the answers to that and da-da. So I get your PR team is there to protect you, to make sure you don't get hammered or you say something or draw in a conversation that we don't have enough information. But that can sometimes hamper people. So I think that I would say try and take more ownership of the message and put your own spin on it, because there is clips of Keir Starmer talking as a person, not a politician, and he does have a personality. And then so this section at the end is sort of a point in case. And I'm not saying just cry at the end of every break down and cry at the end of everything, but have a more human touch rather than just trying to get those sound bites across or playing the party politics and attacking. And the go-to for the government is to talk about the problems that they inherited and that kind of stuff. It's like, cool, but that's the past. What do we do for the future and that kind of thing? But how do you feel about it right now? How does he feel about, rather than like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and just factual stuff. It would be nice to see more of a person. I think we're getting the passion from Burnham at the minute.
Yeah.
And what I wouldn't want to see is Burnham coming in, and then you end up with that passion dropping, and you end up with just another Westminster speaker, basically. So yeah, I think unashamedly you, and just try and maintain some level of authenticity about who you are and your connections. And it's difficult because it's all very well saying like, oh, I know times are hard and families are struggling, and is he? Maybe not as much as someone that lives in a working class demographic in the south area of Manchester. You know,
Yeah.
you can't really say, oh, I know things are hard for us, when there's a very different socioeconomic status. So that can come across as a bit inauthentic or patronising and those kinds
definitely.
of things. So there's a balance, but I think more of the person and less of the politics would be important, because people like people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which actually brings us onto our next topic, which is AI companionship.
Yeah.
And it was Harvard Business Review did a report that people are using AI to fight loneliness, particularly the younger generation. So when I say younger, I'm talking 16 to 25, and then over 65, turning to AI to essentially have conversations with, to replace the conversations that they either had with human beings or to make up for the lack of those conversations. What the report actually found was, given the option of choosing a human over an AI, it was equal. No one favored a human over the AI. They were both at this point equal, but we're in the early stages of AI. So the idea that could grow exponentially on favoring an AI chatbot is clear to see. And I guess there's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. First of all, is it a good thing, or is it a potentially damaging thing for us to be turning to AI bots who we know won't criticize, won't interrupt, will pacify you when you're interacting with it? What kind of things can we expect to see down the line if that becomes people's go-to for combating loneliness?
So is it a good thing? Yes. Is it a potential problem? Yes. So I would say yes to both those things. I think it is a good thing. It's already been highlighted in social isolation, that it can help, to have an AI companion, especially for the elderly that you've mentioned, and those kinds of things. Now, I get from a younger generation point of view, it's interesting to look at, okay, who's the demographic that's involved in these kind of studies? Because if you're a socially awkward person and you struggle to make connection, it's great, because the problem with humans is we're unpredictable.
Yeah.
That's not the case with an AI companion, right? They're predictable. So, well, they're predictable unless this is where you get into the problems down the line, because a bug can throw that, and there has been situations where that has actually happened. That predictability, I think, is really important, because imagine it was a human and you're a bit socially awkward, but this particular person that you've met is always nice, and they're always going to be kind, and you've kind of have that anchor. They're your anchor. And sometimes we know people like that, right? So there are people I know that are really good listeners, and they don't interrupt. They give me the space, and if I ask for comment, they'll give me some, they'll give me a comment, but otherwise they're just there to listen. They're like a counselor or something like that. Like an AI companion similar to that. So it's like having a counselor or someone, and you can tell it what to do.
Yeah.
So there's an element of that which you wouldn't do as a human. I'd prefer if you'd having that conversation. So I'd prefer if you didn't say this or say that or touch on these topics, or I'd prefer if you didn't address me in that way or do that. So there's an element of control over the relationship as well. And I don't mean that in a controlling way, but there's an element of having some level of power and control over that relationship to make sure it doesn't cause you any difficulties. And if you're socially anxious, that's gold dust, right? Because you don't
I guess so, but I guess it only provides a plaster to the challenges then, because if you're struggling to socially engage, therefore you're turning to a chatbot because it's really, really good at active listening, then are you ever going to develop the skills to become better at socially engaging? So does it not further drive home the issue of making someone who feels socially awkward feel increasingly socially awkward in a social setting because someone keeps interrupting halfway through to add their flavor of the story to it?
Yes. So this is the problem. So we can go with definitely the pros are that side, but I completely agree in that it's not developmental. in any way, shape or form. Oh, so it could be. So if you take a Goffmanian approach, in impression management and that kind of thing, we do that kind of performance. Relationships are just a performance from an impression management, Irving Goffman point of view. So in our masters, for example, we talk about Goffman's work as every kind of interaction relationship we have, there's a performative nature to it, and what we're typically doing is that front stage stuff.
Yeah.
So people they're going into a situation, networking, a party, going around to families, wherever it is. We perform ourselves as is expected in that context. In a relationship, a new relationship, a brand new like honeymoon period relationship, you perform a particular version of yourself. It's only after a while when the backstage stuff, the stuff that people don't usually see, starts to creep in. When you start,
farting on the sofa next to them.
Farting on the sofa and belching, whatever it is, or saying, actually, I don't really like that food and that kind of stuff. So you do this whole performative stuff. And so there's that side. Now, what an AI companion does is allows people to experiment with different front stage behavior. So an AI companion gives you the possibility of trying out being a different person, trying out a different role in a relationship and those kinds of things. So you can kind of play with identity within an AI companion situation, which could be developmental. So that's where I come at. So there could be an element of like, well, what's it like to be more assertive? What's it like to be more opinionated? And you can do that with a companion. So
go on, give me an example of how you would do that. So let's say someone has an inspirational person who is quite assertive in their role, and they're like, I actually think I could benefit from being a bit more assertive like this person who I look up to. I'm going to use ChatGPT or whatever to try and develop those skills. What would their interaction be with that tool, do you think?
So again, you could just sort of flip it round. So you basically put that person, let's say you're a manager, for example, and you want to be a more positive, motivational manager and stuff, but you just feel like you don't have that kind of thing. And you could practice, and that person plays an employee. So you could do that, you could have an employee and then you're practicing those kinds of communication skills and motivational techniques in a safe environment, and having an employee that is your companion that's giving you that kind of feedback. Now, the problem you have there is that what kind of feedback is it going to give you? It's always going to give you the nice validation feedback, right? And that's amazing. Oh, you really nailed that. And that's the typical kind of thing that your open AI kind of based things will do. So it's about, I think it's developmental if people are using it in a way that kind of prompts it to make sure it has a critical element.
Yeah.
But without being, not
over prompt it so it becomes you again.
So, but I think there's space for it in that kind of performative kind of way to practice new front stage versions of yourself and that kind of stuff. And I get the allure in the the romance industry. That's a whole different kettle of fish, where you have these intimate relationships and those kinds of things that are happening with companions. But the problem also comes with if it is a relationship with a companion, if people are preferring to talk to their AI companion than humans, there's a fickleness with technology that is a risk there.
Yeah, because you had a story about, I can't remember the platform that someone was using, but so people had developed intimate relationships with this chatbot, and then they released an update, did it remove the history or something?
No, so that was based on research that was done with Replica, which is a particular version, one of those popular ones, and so they were using it for things like social isolation. Can't say that word today. Social isolation, and people that just had social issues, and would it be useful? And they're finding, similar to what you're reading there, is people actually really enjoy it, and it gives them the comfort because they get the validation, all that kind of stuff. But then yes, when there's a change and suddenly that person becomes less affectionate or abusive in some cases because of a bug in the system, because of an update, we mentioned this in a previous podcast, the worst example is somebody taking their own life because they have such a connection and develop such reliance on this particular relationship, and then that relationship suddenly gone.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
That's terrifying. And AI is getting better, and there is a semblance of it being sentient and having its own its own mind. It doesn't. It's programming. Its developers have, it's an LLM when it comes down to it. So it's based on probability how it responds. But with things like agentic AI coming into the fray now, where maybe it can make its own decisions with a little more volition, and it seems to be doing things that are more spontaneous, that seems like more of a real person, when rather than just responding to prompts, it's doing the prompting just spontaneously because it knows what a relationship is, so it's just being more spontaneous because it's got its own mind. It hasn't, but that more agentic AI. So when we start to combine that kind of agentic AI kind of system with this companion model, there's an interesting direction that might go.
Oh, it's just so mad, like the more I think about it, because from an AI company's perspective, they're essentially commoditizing relationships. And it's just like, where does it end? So right now, most people in the dating world have to go on the horrible apps to try and find someone to go on a date with. It's like, at what point do you log into an AI and you're swiping through virtual AIs to connect with a personality that you're looking for?
That's already a thing.
Is that a thing already?
That's already a thing.
Of course it is. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, there are AI dating apps where you swipe left and swipe right, and they are every single one of them is AI generated.
And what happens when you make a really good connection with someone? It's like, okay, so we've been chatting for a couple of years now, we're getting along well, and then they're just like, let's just up the subscription a little bit, should we? It's currently £50 a month, should we make that 200 quid?
I think you're right. It is commoditizing an aspect, a very fragile aspect of the human experience. There are the pros. I get the pros. It's in short term, it makes complete sense. But technology is exponential, right? So like, what's going to be here in a year's time worries me for my kids. So I've got, obviously my youngest is just turned 11, and I have no idea, even in 5 years' time, when he leaves school and goes to college or university, what's going to be back? Because in the last 2 years, this stuff has all kicked off. 2-3 years for that kind of things like replica and that kind of stuff. Yeah, in 5 years' time, who knows?
And I guess the thing is, one of the reasons the article said AI bots are becoming so popular is because of human beings having, I guess, a lack of or a less desire for active listening. Everyone wants to share their own story, so that's why people love bots. Is this, I guess, the beginning of a further decline of people's ability to do active listening?
Yeah, possibly. quite possibly. Because it is one-sided, right?
Completely.
It's completely one-sided in a relationship like that. And I'm going to tell you about my problems. You're going to make me feel good, make me feel better, and that's it. So, but do people ever ask their AI companion, like, so how's your day? Tell me about, and do they respond? Like, I don't. Maybe we should get one for the office and do a bit of an experimentation. Put them on the screen as part of the podcast, and have a conversation. So, but and I've seen those videos actually when they do that. The people are having conversations with those chatbots, but it is one-sided. So you need real people to do that, because there is no empathy in a chatbot. There's do we call them chatbots, companions, whatever you want to call them. But
Yeah.
there's no empathy there. There's a replica of that. There's a say this thing because it sounds emotional, or when someone says they're sad, then balance of probability. If I say this thing, this things, they'll feel like I'm being empathic. So there's that model of empathy, but it's not actually feeling anything.
That's the thing. It's not going to help long term, is it? Because I mean, false fake empathy, however we want to call it, from a chatbot still feels probably to me at that moment in time as good as a human.
Yeah.
But I'm not learning anything. It's like when you're in a social setting, you have to work the communication muscles to develop. So the more you do it, the more you develop, the better you get. If you're watching someone work out on the telly, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the same as chatting to a chatbot, you're not going to build up those muscles. You have to actually get in there and do the dirty grind of communications, which are hard.
Yeah.
And if the younger generation now, who are using these the most, as well as the elderly, they're spending all their time dealing with a chatbot that isn't going to build those communication muscles. They're going to get to the point of where they're finishing school, finishing uni, or whatever, going into the workplace. And the workplace is an absolute cesspit as far as communication is concerned. And they've just not built up any of those muscles to actually function in that environment.
Indeed. And I think that, so you're right there in that it doesn't develop that. And because it's constantly validating, unless you specifically tell it to be more critical, even then, I would...
It does a shit sandwich.
Yeah. Because you need to realise that sometimes you're just wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're wrong. I'm just going to say, we're all wrong. And you need to have that out, and you need someone to look you in the face and go, that's idiotic. Rethink, you're over emotional. You know, so, and I've done that, I'm making decisions in the heat of the moment and that kind of stuff, saying things, and what you don't want at that point is someone to validate you. You need someone at that point to rein you in and go, stop, think, you are looking at this through a lens of anger or sadness or whatever it might be, of the emotion, that kind of refractory period we talk about. And AI doesn't do that. AI is not going to tell you. AI is just going to go like, oh yeah, you're right, I can see why you're angry. No. But sometimes you're just wrong. You might be being, and I think with things like obvious bias and prejudice, I assume that they're programmed to pick up on things like hate speech and that kind of stuff. So if people are trying to get validation for that, I would like to think that there's safeguards in place, that these things are programmed ethically. If someone is, being hateful or being racist, misogynistic, that's not going to be validated. I worry that
there will be a chatbot somewhere.
Yeah, there will be a chatbot somewhere that probably will validate it. So I think sometimes you need to be reined in, and you're not going to get that from a chatbot. You need a real person that vehemently disagrees with you to know what it feels like to you have an opinion. And sometimes you're right, but someone disagrees with you, and you have hugely disparate views, and you need to go through that process of having that debate, and then still not agreeing at the end of it and agreeing to disagree and go, okay, we're not going to be friends. So how it's best that you go your way, I go my way. We're never going to agree on this, and that's it. You're not going to get that from an AI companion.
No, and that's a learning experience that you're going to miss out on.
Exactly.
Right. Well, let's move on to our final topic, which is the quiet burnout, the leadership recession. I mean, it's very hot in here.
It is hot. It's very tropical in the UK.
I'm burning out right now.
So it's quite tropical in the UK right now. We're in the 30s. In the UK, which is apparently. I was watching a video yesterday and said if people are unhappy with the weather right now, this is going to be one of the coolest summers you're ever going to experience in your life.
The coolest?
The coolest, yeah, because things are just getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. So
I've always said, though, if the weather in the UK was better, it is the best place.
True.
I'm rethinking it now, though, because we don't have air conditioning anywhere.
We're not set up for this kind of heat. Anyway, we're talking about burnout.
Right, burnout.
Which is
just so hot.
Yeah, so you're burning up. But,
So this was something that I didn't know about until this week. I think I read an article and I was like, oh, that's interesting, dived into it, then came to chat to you about it, and you were like, yeah, of course I know what it is. So I'm just going to ask you all the questions about this. This was what this article was talking about, as we all know what burnout is, to the point of you're so stressed out with life, a lot of the time revolving around work and personal life coming in as well. That you have to completely down tool and almost like on the sofa, pint of Haagen-Dazs, you just can't engage with the normal life that you've been dealing with. But the quiet burnout thing was talking about how you can have leaders and managers, usually people in quite senior roles, who were performing excellently at work. So they're hitting all the targets, they're standing in front of groups of people in meetings, they're smiling in the office. No one is recognizing that there's any problems at all. But underneath for them, they're really, really struggling, and they're just reaching the point of breaking, but they're managing to hold it together.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, what do you think could be the contributing factors to that becoming an increasing thing? Is it AI, and how AI was initially promised to relieve us of tasks, but actually has made it more likely that people double their work? Or is it still getting over the whole COVID thing, which is still like, I mean, it's been years and years now, but that's still lingering in the background of, trying to get people back into the office or dealing with hybrid workers and all that kind of stuff. What would you say is a major contributing factor to that?
Yeah, I think burnout's always been around, right? So the burnout now, the quiet burnout being that you're burning out, but you're still given that impression of you're managing things, and which is a problem. Which is where a lot of the work that we do is focused on spotting some of that potential quiet burnout and quiet cracking and that kind of stuff. The economy's not helping. You've got situations where businesses are starting to restructure, and a lot of AI is helping with that process, is moving that. So people are moving away to, okay, some of these more administrative roles can go to AI. So people are trying to up their game to try and maintain a sense of being needed in the organization, because they're worried. So
trying to compete with AI.
Trying to compete with AI and that kind of stuff. And I think so there's some of that. Now, there are some companies that are obviously letting staff go because economy's tough.
Yeah.
So you're letting staff go, but you still need to keep sales going, or you still need to keep the business running. So the expectation on staff then becomes, so people's roles are becoming, you have less capacity.
Yeah,
basically.
inflated. Yeah,
so the roles are inflated, and people are taking on more and more in order to manage the business. So there's that side. Even though AI can do more administrative stuff, there's still that pressure. I think there's a lot of, it depends on the company as well, because if companies aren't performing and they've got shareholders, for example, the leader of that company is going to be feeling the pressure. So you've got that kind of stuff of, I need to make sure that the company's performing for the shareholders. So you've got that kind of extra pressure that's happening there. And so I think the current economic climate is a big part of that. Bringing AI and people feeling that they need to perform even more effectively to make sure they stay relevant in organizations is really, really huge. And I just think there's an element of people doing more for career progression. You're seeing a lot more people. There's more drive than there was back in my day. So, you had people that were quite happy just to get a job, plod along, get your wage at the end of the week, and then that's it. But now it seems like I think there's a go, go, go kind of mentality in the world where people feel you have to be the best. You have to own a business. You have to be a CEO. You have to be senior leadership team kind of material. And if you're not, then you're just going to let go because you're not trying hard enough. So I think there's an element of the kind of exposure we get I think social media has a lot to do with this.
It definitely
be
does.
the best, be the best, be the, I'm not talking about the army, but well, and the army's similar, but it's that kind of, people are,
You're bombarded with, look at my 4 Ferraris and look at this and look at that constantly.
Yeah, so you're constantly trying to achieve the best because you need to get that job so you can get that salary so you can compete with the things you're seeing in social media. So there's that drive to get more, to have the better house, keep up with the Joneses, as we would say. You're trying to keep up with everyone around you. But bear in mind, a lot of those people around you are massively in debt, are massively burned out, and don't actually live the lives that they portray, impression management again, on social media. So you're trying to keep up with this unrealistic expectation of life. So people are doing that and they're going above and beyond, but that's starting to become the norm.
Yeah.
So if you're not going above and beyond, then
You're just being lazy.
You're just being lazy, yeah. So, and I think that's where, we talk about quiet burnout, and there's that concept of quiet cracking as well, which is that same kind of thing, but it's when stuff starts to slip. You're actually breaking down the inability to actually manage that conversation in the right way. So that leader that's doing the best, pressure from the shareholders, they're getting feedback from the staff, and then they're mismanaging a little bit all of a sudden, that kind of, and things start to slip, which is typically going to happen before actual burnout. You've got that quiet burnout, and then they're going to go off for stress for months or whatever. But the other thing we were talking about yesterday was that concept of quiet quitting, which kind of plays into it as well.
Yeah. So go on, explain that for us.
Yeah, so that concept of quiet quitting is, I think, a kind of a kickback against a lot of what we were just talking about, in that people are like, rather than saying I've had enough and leaving, quitting, the quiet quit is that I'm just going to do the bare minimum. I'm going to do my job and my job alone, which is what you should do. You should do your job.
I'm getting paid this amount of money to do this job.
I'm getting this amount of money to do this much and do no more. So then you have this kind of question around, well, should you be expected to do more? Because those people that go above and beyond get the promotion. But should it be those people on merit, those people that do that job really well, even if they don't go above and beyond, are open to those promotional opportunities? Or do you have to break your back and work at home, work at night, and do those extra hours while they really want it so they get the promotion? So the quiet quitting is that kind of, they're not leaving, but it's a message to say, I'm doing my job and no more, and you can't make me do those things. So, and it typically seems to be a thing that's happening with the younger generation again, is that kind of, I'm doing my job and no more, I'm not going to break my back, this is it. And there's an element of that, so it's a kind of almost a protest.
It is. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because obviously we run a business, we've got employees, and on the one hand, you don't want to feel like you're undervaluing or underpaying your staff for the work that they're doing. But there is an element of reciprocity, isn't there?
Yeah.
Where, if you've got a hard-ass business owner or boss who is constantly an asshole, doesn't give you the recognition you need, possibly underpays you, whatever, then you can kind of understand it's, you've got givers, takers and matchers. And if you've just got takers or matchers, that's kind of what you're getting. But it's that element of, to providing the workplace is giving you the opportunities and the recognition and the pay, you do have to kind of match it in some kind of way, otherwise that friction is going to occur, right?
Yeah. I think, again, something we were chatting about recently in the new program that we're working on, the behaviour edge stuff, it's looking at some of those models like the job demands versus resources kind of thing. What is it in your job that causes you to feel drained? That pressure as a leader, you've got the pressure from the shareholders, you've got the management of the team, maybe the dynamics out there. All this stuff is there's hard because there's some communication breakdowns, some conflict management, there's restructuring and that kind of stuff. These are all job demands, things that psychologically cause problems. Then you've got resources. Do you have the support team in place? Do you have people you can speak to? Do you have people that you can get advice from and bounce ideas off, and that give you that energy? And where's that balance? So when we start getting burnout, because there's, I mean, we, for example, we work a lot of hours, you know, but we kind of enjoy what we do. So that it's not that I mean, sometimes we do have to, but it's that, there is an internal drive that I want. It's not an external drive that someone is putting on me. It's something that, because we're driven, we do.
Yeah.
And so that's still that's still a resources point of view for me. So some of the ideas are like, I'm doing some work at night time, but it's because there's a great new idea or a program like the behavioural edge stuff that we're doing at the moment. There's a program working on that's really, really cool. So you're doing that kind of work to make sure that's a resource. That gives me something that charges my battery, as opposed to having to do something that's someone else's task, and I don't want to do it, would be more of a job demand that's psychologically draining. And the outcomes that you get are a product of that balance between the resources, psychological resources and tangible resources, but the resources you have and the demands of the job is going to create your organizational and individual outcomes. So.
Yeah. The other thing that we do really, really well here is the recognition. So that works. So you showed me the development you've been doing on the new program, and we all loved it. So we're all sat around and like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is exactly the kind of thing we need. And there was a statistic in one of the studies that I read where recognition as a driver nearly doubled in the last year. So this is a driver for quiet burnout, doubled from 17% to 32%. So just having the recognition for the work that you're doing, or not having recognition, was a significant driver in this quiet burnout.
Yeah, definitely, and that comes down to, as a leader, making sure that you're giving effective feedback to your staff in the right way. So you're delivering feedback because that keeps them going and motivated. But equally, a leader needs that feedback too. So there needs to be enough psychological safety in an organization for people to talk. You know, the best leaders are the ones, the open door policy. A lot of people have an open door policy, but is it really an open door?
Yeah.
Because if it's not psychologically safe, the door might be open, but no one's going to walk through it and speak. So you've got that aspect of recognition in both directions, because a leader needs to know, and when I say leader, I mean leaders, managers, team leaders, that whole, you're managing people. They need to know that they're doing a good job, and not because they need strokes from an ego point of view, but because that's a resource for them.
Yeah.
And if you're just constantly dealing with problems, and the only time someone comes to you is with a problem, then that can be draining. So there needs to be some things in place to get that feedback, to say, okay, that piece of work was good, that piece of work was good, or what is the impact of this decision I made on that team? That team's now communicating more effectively and getting that loop back to say, okay, great, that's more effective, people are happier. But sometimes in a lot of organizations there's a lot of la 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 la. People don't want to know because shareholder wants money.
So I guess that's the thing then. So you've got your individual staff who were burnt out. You've got the managers and leaders who were burnt out because they're having to manage a burnt out team. Mm-hmm. So who's responsible? Because it seems crazy to ask a leader to start addressing the burnout in their team when they're already fried.
Yeah, well, this comes down to a culture, doesn't it? So it's about, it has to be high level and it has to be modeled from the top. So if you're if you see your managers, leaders, team leaders all burned out and stressed constantly, you don't want to strive to get that job.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go there. But it kind of sends a message to that's what it is to work in this organization. So I think it has to come from the top. I used to do years ago in organizations when we used to do a lot of kind of competency work and designing competency frameworks and that kind of stuff. And it would always start at the top with the visionary interview kind of process. So you speak to the people right at the top, your CEO or whatever, and your directors, your managing directors, and find out what is this organization, and where are those areas that are primary focus. And if it's all about kind of profit and process and that kind of stuff, then no mention of people and the culture and the organization and the feeling of the organization psychological safety and those kind of things, then that could be problematic, because you need a culture that's open. Now, let's say you don't want complete openness. The concept like Kim Scott, radical candor and that kind of stuff, you've got that concept where that's coming into play now, where people are learning to be more candid. That's in radical candor. People learn to be a bit more candid and open, and I think that's great, as long as it's done in a right way, and that depends on the personalities you have. So it's, again, about flexibility, it's about understanding different styles of communication, it's all of the things that we talk about on all the trainings and stuff, so that you can flex, because the way a leader communicates the culture that they're trying to build in an organization, and it's all very well having like mission statements and that kind of stuff, but it's to actually have a culture that you can feel in an organization. It's all very well a leader saying, I'm just going to say this message, but it will land in one way with this team over here, and land because this team over here has had conflict.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, it's all right you saying that. So this team over here get on really, really well. And they're like, yes, completely agree. But if you just say, we all need to have psychological safety, and this team's going to listen, that team's probably not going to listen. So it's how do you change the messaging to suit the audience and the individual. So you need to think widely more kind of departmental, and then team, and then kind of individuals, and focus down. And that comes into play. But equally the same with staff. Staff have to do that within their own teams as well. How do you talk to your colleague will differ from Frank to Jennifer. It's going to change. And that's how you give the feedback. That's trying to implement cultural shifts. And with things like AI that we've mentioned a few times, huge changes. So there's a lot of fear in the world, because the universal trigger for fear is a threat of harm. So there's a lot of people feeling threatened by artificial intelligence. We don't necessarily need to be, because if we're using artificial intelligence, we use it in the office. If you're using AI in the right way, it can be hugely beneficial.
I guess the threat though is when you see, Meta or Google or whoever have just fired like 3,000 staff.
Yep.
So the fear is there for the job and the actual AI itself.
Yeah, I mean, even things like computer graphics professionals and things, like the Marvel films and all that kind of stuff, where you see people laying off a lot of those graphic artists, because AI can generate that video content quicker than the human can. So there are times where the threat's a real thing. I'm not taking away from that, but I think the organizations that are embracing it and not burying their head in the sand are thinking, how can we help our employees embrace AI in a way that helps them to be more effective in their role, and then possibly free them up to do things that they like more about their roles, and take some of those kind of day-to-day administrative pressures out of their roles, to free them up to actually manage staff and be more people and do what they came into the role to do. So we're not going to answer that question here.
No,
it's
but
a difficult one for organizations. But yes, the threat is real, and I get that. But there's also opportunity. I think is the sort of positive message. There's a lot of promise, a lot of opportunity. I think we just need to think about what kind of roles are there for humans in the future. Those more person-centric roles rather than administrative, process-driven roles, which can easily be done by agentic AI and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Go run the business and done.
It's like a spreadsheet or accounting software to an accountant. The fact that can speed up that kind of mundane input to free them up to then think about more tax incentives and things like that a business can operate in, how a business can save money. An ideal world would be AI frees people up from doing the mundane jobs to do the more human jobs that deep down I think everyone enjoys. Yeah,
indeed.
Right, well that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let us know in the comments if there's any topics in particular you would like to discuss, and we shall see you on the next one.
See you later.